Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
And I'm Ben Matlock, and we were just joking about how, like, pulling a Ben is starting the show and just start coughing and shit. And now, I'm trying to hold back.
Yeah. Well, so once you say it, though, me too. I got that tick. Mine was because I drowned myself on a sip of water before we started, but as soon as you start thinking about it, it makes it 1,000 times worse.
Well, you made that joke, and I was like, what a dipshit. And then, I take a drink of, my energy drink here, and now I'm, it's worse because it's, citrusy, so it just burns your throat.
So the Non-Essential Podcast is a show where the two people on it can't drink without hurting themselves.
It's tough, and it's more reason why, the human body is just a failure in every way. Because, I was thinking about this yesterday, because I don't have hobbies or a life, so I just think about dumb shit. But I was just thinking about, wouldn't it be so much better if you could hydrate just by, splashing water on yourself and absorbing it through your skin? Instead of having to drink water, it's such a pain in the ass.
Oh, but that could be gross. Every time you touch, something that's got moisture in it, you'd be consuming it.
So anytime you clean your bathroom, you're just vomiting.
But then you got to clean the vomit, so oh man.
Yeah, that's a fair point. By the end you would probably turn into that dude from the first X-Men movie who they're I don't know if you saw that, but they get this politician we're gonna make you a mutant, and he turns into just a fucking blob and dies right away. It's great superpower.
You already said he was a politician, though. So
yeah, he was slimy. Now he's we're gonna fuse you with liquid to prove our point. And he just
oh no,
and then he escapes from there, and then just the X-Men find him, and he's oh God, is he okay? And then he's no, I'm and then he just dies.
Why don't we write movies? We could do that.
I want a movie just about that guy. What happened after and then did he fucking drip into a drain somewhere and has to spend his life underground? I could write that. That's an HBO series. Anyway. Yeah. So, if you haven't listened to the Non-Essential Podcast before, it's actually not just us fucking dicking around. Or at least not in that way. Every week, me and Steve get together and tell each other stories about random things. And we're 48 episodes in, and that's frightening in some ways.
Yeah, death seems to be a central theme, but sometimes it's fake stories, and sometimes it's not death. Sometimes it's just I tend to go for the con men and just shitty people and just stuff.
And I try to lighten it up with serial murder. And this week a little bit different. I have touched on kind of getting away from weird specific people, and I've occasionally delved into weird geographical areas, and this is in that vein. So in the Glastonbury Mountain woodlands of Vermont, there are numerous reports of dangerous unidentifiable creatures, reports of strange floating lights, and frequent reports of disappearances without a trace. So even though you could just say it's this mountain region, everybody has to make it a fucking triangle. It always has to be a fucking spooky triangle. So a folklorist named Joseph A. Citro gave the area the nickname the Bennington Triangle, named after the city of Bennington, where it sort of starts and then stretches out to the ghost towns of Glastonbury and Somerset, with kind of this mountain region just sort of lodged in the middle of it. So before any disappearances or strange occurrences became widely known about this area, the original tribes believed that the area was cursed from the get-go. One Algonquin legend told of an evil enchanted stone that would open up and devour anyone who stepped on it. And what
that sucks. Like, I imagine it looks like any other stone. So every time you step on a stone, you're like, "Ow, that hurt my foot. Fuck, am I going to get eaten?"
Right. It's like one of the most cartoonishly brutal things I've ever read. Or it's just like you're just walking on a wooded path and then.
It's very Stephen King-esque.
Yeah. Stephen King, write that fucking book. Like, I haven't read a Stephen King book in forever, and that's why. You got to fucking get a good monster in there.
Demon Rock.
I always thought like Stephen King was at his best when he was writing just like adult versions of Goosebumps stories. Like that's basically what it is. Like it is like, what if a clown was everything you were afraid of, but really it's just a fucking spider?
Brilliant.
And like any stretch of woods, there's Sasquatch rumors. As early as the mid-1800s, people reported sightings with passengers of one stagecoach at one point claiming that a hairy beast ambushed them and pushed the coach over before disappearing into the forest during a sudden downpour. Which is exactly what I would tell people back then to avoid admitting that I'm a very bad driver.
I was drunk.
Should not be trying to drive in bad weather.
I love the idea of a Sasquatch that like just pushes the cart over, though. He's just like a prankster Sasquatch. Like,
well, that's so many Bigfoot rumors. We've talked about him before, but it's like he's just like throwing rocks at tents and shit, and like spitting on people, and he's just kind of an asshole.
Dumbass humans. Yeah.
Anyway, so it's already kind of got a reputation of being kind of creepy, but things didn't get really weird until 1943, when a Carl Herrick went missing during a hunting trip 10 miles northeast of Glastonbury. He was found 3 days later, having been squeezed to death and surrounded by huge footprints. But this is as well substantiated as just about any other supposed Bigfoot attack. Like, anywhere that says this is what they found there is places like already predisposed to believe that it was a Bigfoot attack. There's not really much to really base it off of. The real disappearances, and kind of the odd ones, began in 1945 when a hunting guide named Mitty Rivers was leading a party back to camp through the woods in an area called Hell Hollow, which I don't know why you would name anywhere in the woods that.
We're going back to camp. We can either take the Sunshine Meadows or Hell Hollow.
Right.
Hell Hollow, please.
It's just reminding me, I've posted it on Twitter before, but me and my friends were hiking one time, and somebody like tore off one of like the hiking guide maps that you'll find on any trail, really.
Sure.
And it's not a big deal because it wasn't that big of a trail, but somebody just like tore it off and then just like spray painted a happy piece of toast on there, and then underneath wrote toast. And it's like two paths. You could go down Toast Path, Happy Toast Path, or Hell Hollow.
I don't know. I think I might pick Hell Hollow because Happy Toast Path seems like one of those where you're like, that sounds pleasant, and then that turns into the real, like...
It's just a trick.
Yeah.
Anyway, at some point, Rivers broke away from the others and disappeared from view. His companions weren't too worried, as Rivers was, by all accounts, a very skilled woodsman, but he was 74 years old, and after some undetermined amount of time where he didn't catch up with them, they began to look. They believed he was probably still alive, but eventually it led to a 300-man search through this wilderness that lasted for 8 days, where they didn't find a single trace of Rivers other than a single rifle cartridge.
Spent or?
It was a loaded one, so some that didn't get reloaded into the rifle. I think it was completely full. The most infamous disappearance in the Bennington Triangle would happen a year after that. The 18-year-old Paula Weldon decided to hike a leg of the long trail during her Thanksgiving break back home from school. It was December 1st, and everybody distinctly remembers that Paula wore an easy-to-spot red outfit that was certainly not meant to withstand the expected cold that would have been coming that night, but definitely would have stood out in the woods during that day. When she didn't show up for her Monday classes, a massive search party of 1,000 people began to look for the girl, even offering a $5,000 reward. The last people to see her were an elderly couple who were about 100 yards behind her but completely lost sight of her when she turned a corner. Despite all these, this 1,000-man effort and numerous aircrafts and assistance from a variety of law enforcement departments, they could not find one trace of Paula. It's worth noting that Paula's father insists that the authorities lacked any sophisticated methods to finding his daughter, and the case technically remains open to this day. So it could be a paranormal mystery, or it could have just been a bunch of, like, 1,000 people is not very effective if you're just kind of like, I don't know, that way.
Wander in the woods, yeah.
Yeah. Especially if you're covering just like a massive area like that. So people disappearing in the woods was a strange thing, or disappearing in any woods is strange, but certainly not uncommon. The weirder story kind of happened 3 years to the day after Paula Weldon vanished. James Tedford, a war veteran living in Bennington, took a bus trip to see family, and on the way back, passengers confirmed that Tedford had boarded the bus on the last stop before returning to Bennington. But when the bus arrived, the man was gone. His luggage remained in the overhead compartment, and his timetable was lying open next to his seat, but he just wasn't there.
Damn it, it's that creepypasta from a few weeks ago.
Right. Some people think the passengers are wrong about him getting on the bus, but his belongings were there. Others think he was killed somehow, but you would think that would be impossible to hide.
It's the perfect crime.
The perfect crime is when an entire bus of people don't acknowledge the violence.
Or you dumping the body out the tiny little window.
Like, I'm wondering what his excuse would be. He's just like shoving it through that tiny slot window. Like, no, he just needs some air. Okay?
He's sleeping.
He's sleeping. He's snoring. I'm just trying to make it so he snores outside, guys. There's no real satisfying explanation to this one, but it's probably just, people were wrong about him getting back on. Yeah. In 1950, 8-year-old Paul Joseph was left playing with his toys in the family. Did I say 1950? I think I said 1850. I fucked up. 1850. In 1950, 8-year-old Paul Joseph was left playing with his toys in the family pickup truck while his mom left the vehicle to attend pigs that she was a volunteer caretaker of in the Bennington woods. When she returned, the 8-year-old Paul was gone. Like Paula, Paul was wearing a bright red jacket that should have stood out, but there was no sight of him. Police dogs were able to follow his scent for a few miles in the direction of the Glastonbury Mountain, but the trail vanished. This led folklorists to say that wearing red in this region is bad luck. I
would say right now I think you're looking at a half Yeti, half bull.
Well, it's bad luck because we can count two people who wore red, and it didn't work out. Some believe Jepson was actually killed by his parents, with the body being thrown to the pigs. But, that couldn't be confirmed. His father actually told the Albany Times-Union newspaper that it was as if the lure of the mountains seemed to pull his son toward the deep, dark woods, as the boy talked of nothing else for days leading to that trip.
That sounds like the kind of thing that you would say if you were going to murder your son and feed him to pigs.
Yeah.
Like just some, cock-ass,
Yeah.
The boy
called to him.
He was strangely obsessed with it, so we left him alone in the car.
Yeah. Just a few weeks after Jepson disappeared, Frida Langer was camping with relatives in the woods near the mountain. Taking a short hike with her cousin Herbert, Langer accidentally fell into a small stream, soaking her clothes and shoes. She asked her cousin to wait for her while she went back to the camp to change out of them. After some time, Herbert returned to find Langer's husband alone at the site with no sign of her. When she hadn't returned, they immediately started searching for her, which led to helicopters from the Coast Guard and Army, along with just local pilots helping in the search. 400 people were in the woods and found nothing in their initial searches. But unlike the other disappearances, though, Langer's body was found 6 months later near Somerset Reservoir in an open area that had been extensively searched numerous times in the previous months. Making it more confusing, the body had decayed so badly that they couldn't figure out what actually killed her and how she came to end up at this place in the Triangle after people had looked for her so long. So, you might think, well, maybe she just survived that long and ended up dying there, but it's then how was she so decayed after that much time? So these are kind of the bulk of the disappearances, so what's happening here? Obviously the Bigfoot theories are big, and if there are Bigfoot theories, obviously there's going to be a different group of people who think it's UFOs.
I think it's butterflies.
Yeah.
Nobody ever suspects them because they seem so tiny and delicate, but
I think it's the call of the mountain. Hell, a lot of these people who think it's paranormal explanations think that this triangle, the very nature of it makes reality fragile somehow, that some otherworldly dimension is having an effect on the region and making it impossible to determine the actual fates of all these people who get lost in these woods, which is really just a roundabout way of saying, I don't know what's happening here. I shouldn't be weighing in on it.
Well, right. Out of those stories, I mean, that last one is kind of, without looking at a map and seeing where she disappeared from and where she was found and, the timeline there.
Yeah.
They all, it's that's curious, but they all have very simple explanations. Woods are dangerous if you're there by yourself. One wrong step and you fall, you only have to fall 10, 15 feet to break a leg or something and not be able to make your way back somewhere before, you freeze at night or whatever. But, I don't know. It's interesting. And it feels like to me, you have one or two weird disappearances. And then if you're a serial killer, you're this is my perfect cover. Anybody I murder, they're going to say, hey, it was a Yeti.
Well, that's, funny you brought that up because that's the next theory, is a lot of people think that a serial killer was hiding in the woods and was responsible for that stretch of disappearances from 1940 to 1950. It is worth noting that in 1892, this one was documented, a sawmill worker named Henry McDowell beat a coworker to death with a rock and escaped from the state asylum and supposedly lived the rest of his days in those woods. But McDowell himself would have been really fucking old by the time those specific disappearances happened. And while it doesn't necessarily have to be McDowell in order for the serial killer theory to be possible, it definitely doesn't fit the behavior we know about serial killers. All the people who vanished were wildly different, and most serial killers tend to target a specific type of victim. Here we have a young child, a young woman, an older woman,
and kind of in different circumstances too. The kid was in a car by somebody, and then some of the hikers were by themselves and some were with other hikers.
The only thing they have in common is they were in the woods. So,
see, that's what I mean. To me, it doesn't feel more like a serial killer per se, but it feels more like if you're pissed at somebody and want to kill them for some reason, it's a very convenient cover to do that.
That's the thing about the Langer case is the last person who maybe could have seen her was probably her husband. Because, or Herbert. It's Herbert's story kind of as well that she went back to camp to change.
And that you didn't go with her.
Right.
If it's just the two of you, you'd think, well, okay, we'll both go back to camp and then we'll...
Yeah. So it's those two, I don't buy that story, really. So, and the killer theory is possible, but like I said, it's not really likely. But this is kind of just a weird area. I'm always trying to find the most sensible solution to stories like this, but the truth is I don't have much of an answer besides sometimes the woods are fucking dangerous and it's very easy to get lost in them. And,
well, and I think that's part of what makes these places seem so mysterious is because our tendency, our nature is to find one explanation that fits all these disappearances.
right.
When in reality, they could all be totally different things. You know, only relation is that they happened in the same area. I
right.
mean,
You know, there could have been foul play. They could have just been attacked by wildlife. And some of them probably just got lost and starved.
a couple of them probably did get killed by a Yeti, or they became the Yeti's lovers.
Yeah, but the truth is, you know, I like I said, I'm always trying to find the sensible solution, but the truth is I don't have any more evidence than I would for those who would claim these people were eaten by a rock. So
You mean your reading about them on the internet didn't uncover anything new that they didn't have
right, I didn't have that
80 years ago?
I didn't have that like, you know, Oxygen documentary series, you know, montage of like I uncovered the facts.
I had to travel to this area to see it for myself. I found all these bodies laying around. It was weird.
I didn't find McDowell, but I did find a McDonald's nearby. Perhaps this could be the breakthrough I needed.
Crash cut to Ronald McDonald's face, like dun dun dun.
So yeah, that's the Bennington Triangle.
It's interesting. The dumbest thing about all of it is it really makes me want to go hiking in the Bennington Triangle.
Right. You know, I read these stories. I want to just go to these places.
As I'm falling to my death in like the most like mundane way that explains all of these, you're like, oh, I get it. Bump. There's just like an underground cave system that these people keep falling victim to.
What if you got eaten by a rock and like just...
I'd get spit back out. The rock would be like, this guy's fucking gross.
He's fucking greasy. Ew, dude, did you put pomade in your hair? Why?
Come on, have some respect. Take care of yourself. Yeah, if you were a creature, or I guess a cannibal, serial killer, and you wanted to eat people, I think hikers would be the worst ones to eat because you're dirty and sweaty, and depending on how long you've been in the woods, yeah.
I mean, I hike. I wouldn't eat me. If you like put me in a lineup.
Yeah, if I was a person-eating monster, or a person-eating person, who would, I guess, be a monster, I think you'd want to prowl like a spa or some place where people are literally like have just been freshly bathed.
Literally marinating with cucumbers on them.
Delicious.
Like there's just like a horrible cannibal just like licking his lips. I was like, wow, he has avocado paste on her.
I get the cucumbers, but what are the fava beans for?
He's literally in a tea bath marinating for me.
Yeah.
That's why I don't take it. That's why I'm fucking disgusting. I'm trying to ward off cannibals. That's what it is.
I'm not lazy. I'm just extra cautious. Anyway, our themes are going to kind of be similar, but on a different note, be completely different. So, the catch-all statement of the year.
In so many ways, we're alike and we're different. Okay.
So the Amazon was a brigantine, which of course we all know is a two-masted sailing vessel with square sails. I didn't have to look it up. She was built in Nova Scotia. The ship was completed in May of 1861. Robert McClellan, would serve as captain on her maiden voyage. But while supervising the loading of the ship at Five Islands, which is off the shore of Nova Scotia, McClellan became ill, so the ship returned to Spencer Island where it was built, where McClellan would end up dying of his illness. So it's off to a great start.
It's clearly not fit to lead. If you can't take down the illness.
Right. I mean, if you can't load your ship and get out to sea, you're not cut to be a captain.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's what they say on Deadliest Catch.
John Nutting Parker took over, And if I was a more immature person than I am, I'd take a moment to say something like, "Nutting now commanded all the seamen aboard the vessel," or something.
But I'm glad you're not that
I won't
guy.
do that. Right. I mean, we're a classy show.
If I were a lesser man, I would bring up how nutting is much like sexual activity.
Over the course of the Amazon's first voyage, the ship would end up striking fishing equipment off the coast of Eastport, Maine, and then would strike and sink a brig in the English Channel. Apparently, that was considered good enough for a maiden voyage, though, because Parker would remain the captain of the ship for another 2 years. So, it's like, you ran into a bunch of shit, but you got here. Good enough. After Parker, William Thompson took over as captain, and for the 5 years following the first Iffy voyage, the Amazon ran trade routes between the West Indies, and the Mediterranean without incident. But in October of 1867, a storm drove the Amazon into shore off of Cape Breton Island, which is in Nova Scotia, and caused extensive damage. The ship was abandoned as a wreck. So I guess she had a good run. I said it wasn't... it didn't seem like it was like, oh man, he fucked up or anything. It was just like, well, it happens. And then I guess it's pretty normal to sell off a wrecked ship afterwards, because there's people that want that stuff.
I want a wrecked ship. I would buy like a wrecked ship. Like if you could just do like that photo, like the thing where people like sell you like, you have a star named after you. Just like give me a like random
shipwreck
photo of a shipwreck and say that's your boat.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, cool.
I'll take it as long as it's somewhere where I can like physically get to it.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is like, I'll take your word for it that that's my boat somewhere.
It's there. It's just a rock that hits on the sonar. And
I mean, I don't want to go find it. I mean, clearly those are troubled waters, and my boat sank there.
That's true. Anyway, you can purchase all the wrecks you want, but you can't purchase this one because it was bought by a Mr. Alexander McBean.
What a fuck.
And within a month, McBean had sold her to a New York businessman named Richard Haynes.
He didn't even want it.
Right. He was just the middleman for a wrecked boat, which
fucker
is a market. And it sucks that Haynes bought it because McBean is a fun name to say, and Haynes is not.
Haynes is...
It's
stick to
underwear.
Comfy underwear, okay?
Yeah. I'd say moderately comfy underwear and T-shirts with collars that don't wrinkle until they do, and then whatever.
Steve you're fucking up our potential sponsorships.
They were picking up the phone. They're like, 1-800 no.
Oh wow, that guy likes our underwear. Wait, what the other guy say about our collars? No dice.
Haynes bought the wreck for about $1,700 and put about $8,800 into restoring her before naming himself the captain, which is, of course, what I would do.
Yeah,
and
fuck yeah.
If you bought a boat and put a shitload of money in it, I'm going to be the damn captain.
That's what I never understood about shows like Deadliest Catch and stuff. Is like there's boat owners, and then they send the captain out, like, you know, like a baseball manager or something. But it's like, I would totally be like, I'm the captain, you're just doing everything that a captain would do.
And we'd laugh last half a season because
which, I mean,
you wouldn't know what the fuck you're doing.
Well, no, like it would still be technically a crew. I would just get to wear the big hat.
Hoist the mainsail, and all the guys are just like, ignore him. We're not even a fucking sailboat.
This isn't a boat. This is a truck.
So anyway, he named himself captain and re-registered the ship under her new name, the Mary Celeste, which is kind of a perfect spooky name for the kind of story that this will eventually turn into. I just like that for a sea spook story. I don't know why. Unfortunately for Haynes, in 1869, about 2 years after he rebuilt this ship and named himself captain, his creditors seized possession of it because he owed them a shitload of money. For the next 3 years, the Mary Celeste was owned by a consortium of individuals, so basically like a company, you know, it's like a bank took it over and there was no one owner. Yeah, a maritime mob. There's not a lot of... presumably, during the next 3 years, she was in service, but there's no records of what her activity was during those years. But in 1872, she'd get another $10,000 overhaul, this time adding to the ship's length, width, or breadth in proper marine terminology, and depth. So basically, they just made it bigger. The refit included the addition of a second deck, an enlargement of the poop deck, because a bigger boat has bigger poops, and some other stuff that's not really worth detailing. I mostly just wanted to make a poop joke.
Like the laziest fucking one.
Yeah, but you can't say poop deck
obvious.
without... There's no way you can say poop deck and not address it.
Because I'm a professional boating captain.
Well, I'm 12, so... Once the overhaul was complete, a new captain was appointed and given... And I don't know why they do it this way, but I'm going to make fun of it for the rest of the show. He was given 4/12 of the ownership, which for people that don't use stupid math is a third. Captain Benjamin Briggs was the captain that was given these 4/12. He was a man that was born in Wareham, Massachusetts in 18-something. It's not really important. His father was a captain, and 3 of his 4 brothers were also, had careers at sea. A couple were captains, and a couple were just sailors. He was a devout Christian who married his cousin, of course, Sarah Elizabeth Cobb. The newlyweds had honeymooned in the Mediterranean aboard his schooner, the Forest King, which sounds like a romantic honeymoon until you remember that we're talking about the mid-1800s here, and sailing was a god-awful way to spend your time. Like, life at sea sucked. I love reading about it, but it was not good in any way, shape, or form. So, I'm just imagining these people getting married and him being like, let's go away on my boat to the Mediterranean. And his wife's like, fuck. Okay. But the marriage lasted, and the pair had a son and then a daughter. Briggs was successful, but he had been considering retiring from his life at sea. He and his brother Oliver had talked about starting a company and settling down on land, but instead the two invested their savings into separate ships. The ship Oliver invested is unimportant because screw him, this isn't his story. The ship that Benjamin invested in was, of course, the Mary Celeste, so that's how he became captain and came to own 3/12 of the boat. Briggs' first voyage, which would be the first since the overhaul of the ship, would take him from New York to Genoa, Italy. Briggs' wife and 2-year-old daughter would accompany him on the trip for some reason, along with 8 crew, while Briggs' son, who was in school, would stay at home with his grandmother. So, I don't know. Again, with the whole, life at sea sucks, so let's take my wife and 2-year-old daughter with me.
Those will make it better. If I make them miserable here, too.
I kind of get the impression that his wife liked travel and liked seeing different parts of the world. But, I can't imagine it. And again, like I say, I love that whole, 17th and 18th, and into the 19th here century, we love the pirate stories. We've talked about that before. And just even the whaling, which I think is an awful practice. I'm not condoning that in any way. But the time period is very interesting to me. That said, I would not want any part to do with it. Ugh. And then to leave your son too. The one person out of the family, if I'm picturing being 8 years old and my whole family being like, hey, we're going off on this adventure to Italy. And you're like, sweet. And you're like, you're staying with your grandmother and going to school. Be like, fuck. On October 20th, 1872, Briggs would arrive at Pier 50 on New York's East River in time to supervise the loading of her cargo. 1,701 barrels of poisonous, volatile, denatured alcohol.
Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah, it's a lovely cargo to strap in just under the feet of your wife and young daughter, who would be joining him a few weeks later once the ship was set to
party
depart.
Juice? Sorry, honey. Might be a little important.
Honeymoon number 2, here we come. The vessel is lovely trim, and I hope for a fine passage, he wrote in a letter to his mother that certainly wouldn't foreshadow something else entirely. On the morning of Tuesday, November 5th, the ship moved from the East River to New York Harbor. They were supposed to depart that day, but the weather was less than ideal, so he decided to wait it out. His
last journal entry scrolled, "It's going to be a good," and then cuts off.
Well, the delay gave his wife an opportunity to send one last letter again to it would be his mom, but her mother-in-law, but the grandmother who was watching their son. In this letter, she asks that her mother remind their son to write her often, as she'll be depending on hearing from him to keep her going. And also that she would try to remember anything remarkable that happened on the journey so she could tell him about it later. Which, she's basically saying, you better write your mother all the time, and then turning around saying, but I won't write you at all.
And I'll try to remember you.
Yeah, I'll make a passing effort to remember anything cool that happens, and we get to experience while you're stuck with grandma.
To be fair, that's been my experience growing up, is like a lot of my elders always like, you call me, and I was like, you fucking call me, all right?
I just love how she kind of worded that, though. Like, I'll try to remember anything cool that happens to us so I can tell you about it, but no promises. Like, I might forget because so many cool things are going to happen. I think she's trolling her 8-year-old son. Anyway, on November 7th, about 2 days after they were supposed to leave, the ship finally left port. On December 4th, which Wikipedia says is December 5th in sea time, whatever the fuck that is. Yeah. Another Canadian...
Which is like, June 27th in normal time. Like,
yeah, I didn't know there was different like dates depending on if you're on land or at sea, or like maybe if you're in a grocery store, that's a whole different calendar you use. I don't know.
Well, it's like when people believe the world was flat, you hit the edge and then like you shift to the other side of the rectangular earth, and then it's completely different time.
Yeah, you pick up a day when that happens.
Right.
So anyway, on December 4th/5th, another Canadian brigantine called the Dea Gradia was passing between the Azores and the coast of Portugal, which I don't know geography, so I just have to assume that those two things are in proximity to each other. When the ship spotted a vessel about 6 miles out, the ship appeared to be moving on an unsteady course under partial sail, a clear sign that something was wrong. So Captain Morehouse ordered the De Gradia to sail closer in order to investigate. You can probably guess that the ship they spotted was the Mary Celeste. And when the crew of the De Gradia found the ship, it was abandoned. A boarding party found the main hatch secure, but 2 smaller hatches were found open with their covers laying beside them on deck. The ship was under half sail, so some of the sails were out, some of the sails were not furled and unfurled. I don't know, I'm not a sailor. And many of the sails and the rigging were in bad conditions.
Sails were out.
Out or in. They had pressed the triangle button once, if you have played Black Flag. I think it was triangle, whatever it was, to put more sails out.
I love that, though. For as much as we love boats and shit, we really don't know anything about them.
I like looking at them, okay? They're pretty.
Weigh the heavy weight that you put in the water.
That U-shaped thing with a stick on it,
Pull that thing up.
Yeah.
Back that thing up so we can go.
Make ship go now. Port or starburst, I don't know.
Get me candy. Turn the boat towards the starburst candy.
Towards candy, yeah. We're sailors. Anyway, so yeah, half the sails were down, half of them weren't, so it wasn't, not that that's completely unusual. You do that when you want to catch some wind, but not all of it. But some of the sails were missing entirely, and the rigging was kind of, ropes were just hanging over the side of the ship, and some were kind of frayed. There was about 3.5 feet of water in the cargo hold, which is more than you want to be there, but also not a major problem for a ship of that size. So it wasn't like sinking, but it's usually a bad sign when you have... If you can go swimming inside your ship, that's a problem. Or it's going to be a problem. The cargo itself, though, was all accounted for, and the captain and crew's personal possessions were found on board as well. The only thing that really seemed to be missing was the lifeboat, which was a yawl. which, again,
Short
we
for
just
you
explained
all.
how much, we all know our sailing terms as we just discussed, but I'll go over it anyway. It's a small two-masted sailing vessel. And I only wanted to point that out because if you're like me and you picture the word lifeboat, you think those like rafts with some oars, or modern day like the blow-up things. But this is like a small sailboat. The cabins were damp from water coming through the windows and doorways, but were otherwise in order. Morehouse and his men noted that some of the navigational equipment was missing and a lot of the ship's papers were. But they did find the ship's log. The last entry on the log was from November 25th, which would have been 9 days prior to being found, which is probably something like 47 and 8/3 nautical days. I don't fucking know. But according to the log, on the 25th, the Mary Celeste was within sight of one of the islands off of the Azores, which put the ship over 400 nautical miles from where she was found. And again, nautical miles compared to regular person miles, I don't fucking know, but it was a long way away. With no sign of the crew on board or nearby, Captain Morehouse would then tow the Celeste to port and claim salvage on her. Before that could happen, though, there would be a salvage hearing, and it was during this hearing that many theories began to emerge regarding the events aboard the ship and the fate of her crew. Which, by the way, I won't keep you hanging. They were never seen or heard from again.
Until today. Bring them on. You're like...
I'm Captain Briggs, and I'm sound very healthy for my age. I'm 140 some years old.
You just have like the sound of like a skeleton jaw like clacking around.
I'm using his skull, which I found as a puppet, a hand puppet, right?
Thank you, Crazy Crab Bobblehead.
Knew that would come in handy someday.
I knew it.
An initial inspection of the ship reported finding cuts from a sharp instrument on each side of the bow, and traces of blood on the captain's sword, which was found under his bed in the cabin. The inspector determined that the ship had not run afoul of any heavy weather, or, just bad weather, as a delicate vial of sewing machine oil was found still sitting upright. So, they've got like fucking Sherlock Holmes on this thing now. And the hull itself seemed to be in perfect condition and showed no signs of having run into anything, so they didn't hit a reef or another ship or anything like that. A subsequent inspection by the Royal Navy noted a stain on the railing that looked like it could be blood and a deep gash that looked like it was caused by an axe. So the conclusion was made that the crew had gotten into the alcohol and in a drunken frenzy had murdered Briggs and his family.
Had been attacked by the Kraken.
Well, that is one of the theories, of course, but not one of the official ones in the salvage hearing.
And then they didn't do their job.
Exactly.
It's a classic case of a Kraken axe attack.
Kraken axe.
A cracks attack.
That sounds like a body spray. Kraken axe.
Yeah, when Axe and Old Spice merge together.
Yeah.
Because Old Spice always has this, we got the fucking tentacle deodorant. It's like, great.
Do you want to smell like sea life?
Great.
No, not really.
Like Axe gets a lot of shit for how they always sell themselves like, this is the man spray or whatever, but I don't know what the fuck Old Spice is doing. And here's another sponsor out the window, but...
Two of them, really.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like Old Spice is always like fucking, and you and me have talked about it before, but it's like, rub your armpits with wolf's tongue. Yeah, like, why?
Here's Terry Crews for some reason, doing something crazy. Do.
This delicious scent of bearberries.
But like an idiot, I've used Old Spice stuff before. I don't prefer it, but...
Oh yeah, I feel dumb with it. There is not... This is way off your fucking story, but there is not a deodorant product I like. I've realized, like...
But I like not stinking. That's the
thing. I need one of them, but I feel like a douche if I buy any of them.
I get to agree with the little like caricatures on the front doing things like mountain climbing or playing things that my fat ass could never actually do, but I just need that same percentage of like antiperspirant because I'm fat. Like And skinny guy, this will cover you climbing a mountain. Steve, it'll cover you sitting in your chair at the desk.
Yeah. Right now, I'm using a type of axe that says it's antiperspirant, and every part of that is a lie. So I'm very upset with it. So, until they sponsor the show, then Then yeah. That's then use promo code non-essential. No.
A lot of products are way better if you get them for free, though.
Oh yeah, watch my tone change. Even just send me gum and I'll act like it changed my fucking life.
4 out of 5 dentists, but 1 out of 1 Ben recommends.
Oh, I don't have any gums left in my mouth, but that's okay because I have Wrigley's right here.
So anyway, this court that overhears the salvage hearing decided that the most likely thing was that the crew got drunk and murdered the Briggs and then took off on the lifeboat. This, of course, ignores the fact that denatured alcohol is poisonous and in no way fit for consumption. And also, the scenario seems unlikely given that the personal possessions of both the crew and the captain and his family, some of which had pretty good value, were left completely untouched. You'd think if you murdered a family, you'd at least take their shit.
Yeah.
Inspectors also thought that Morehouse, the captain that found the boat, was hiding something. They found it suspicious that he claimed to have found the ship over 400 miles from where the logbook last placed her. Obviously, if they had abandoned the ship, it was sailing around kind of on its own, which was... You can imagine how badly that would work, which is why it was so noticeable, even at 6 miles, when Morehouse and his crew spotted it, that hey, that's not right. And so it was very unlikely that it would have sailed on its own that far in that amount of time, just kind of bumbling around. Then, when James Winchester, who was a member of the consortium who owned 6/12, not 1/2, but 6/12 of the ship, arrived to ask for the release of the cargo so that they could at least, deliver it, inspectors began to suspect that he had hand-selected a crew that would murder Briggs as part of some scheme. Which was also a very stupid theory from some very stupid investigators, given that Briggs was the man who had hand-selected the crew, not, this Winchester guy. And also the fact that murdering your own captain and then completing the delivery on your own dime at a later date is a scheme that really makes no damn sense. You don't get anything out of it. In fact, it costs you money and time.
Yeah.
But apparently, in the 1800s, these investigators didn't think of things like motive or anything. They're just aha! You want your property back. Maybe you murdered him. I think if you mentioned the boat, you became a suspect.
You still draw a breath. That makes you a suspect.
The way flimsier than they'd have you believe theory of foul play became even less plausible after scientific testing, which I don't know what the fuck that is in the 1800s, proved that the stains on the sword and railing and deck were not blood at all, and that the artificial slash marks on the bow that they had posited they thought it was the crew trying to make it look like the boat had hit something, so they slashed it with a
As you can see, I've committed a murder here, and it's nothing like the evidence we found everywhere else on this boat.
Yes, right. So the marks on the ship that were artificial slash marks, the Navy got involved and
as you can see, when I cut my assistant Peter's throat, he bled everywhere. It wouldn't just be one little bit of stain.
Science. But anyway, the marks on the bow that were artificial turned out were not artificial. They were a normal thing that happens from the action of the water against the bow, which you would think if you were a fucking shipping investigatory court, you would be able to figure that out, but apparently not.
Well, it's hard to tell, what is axe blows and the mighty strikes of Poseidon's trident.
It gives you an idea of what sailors probably thought of these court officials, because they're walking around indubitably, these marks, they're awful suspicious. And then the captain's like, they're on every fucking boat. Go look at another boat, you jackass.
Go sail a boat, please.
So anyway, it quickly turned out that there were no actual signs of foul play. I said there was a lot of things that should have been big flags of that in the first place, but whatever. So with nothing else to go on, the court was forced to release the ship back to the owners, who completed the voyage. And they awarded Morehouse with a salvage payment of about 7/35, 1/5, but I wanted to change that so it fit nautically speaking. 1/5 of the value of the ship plus the cargo, which, as we all know, is an insultingly low salvage reward for the time. But it actually was. People expected him, especially with the relative danger of hauling this unmanned ship full of explosive alcohol back to shore. Typically, your salvage percentage was at least in part factored into the risk you took to bring the ship back was played a part. But this court said, "Fuck you! You're only getting 1/5," and that was in part because they still kind of thought that he was maybe responsible, that maybe he found and boarded and slayed the crew and took the ship. I don't know. I guess out of all their stupid theories so far, that one would make the most sense.
Yeah, just like a straight up piracy thing.
But there was still zero evidence of that, given that there were no signs of struggle. I mean, I suppose that you could lure them onto your ship and kill them there, but I can't imagine how you would lure a ship with, like, the captain and his family and the crew, have a plausible reason, like, how about you all come over? Leave your sword, but we're going to have some tea, and we got crumpets, too. Like, ignore all the men lining up behind you with their guns.
Tentacles rising behind you.
The ship's pump had been found disassembled on the deck, and a modern theory, I guess one of these shows that kind of looks into this kind of stuff, had put forth a theory that the pump had become clogged, given that the prior cargo before the alcohol was coal, and coal dust tends to cause those kind of problems. And regardless of how the 3.5 feet of water got into the hold, with the full load, it would have been very difficult for the crew to figure out exactly how much water they'd taken on. And so if your pump's not working and all you know is that there's a lot of water but not exactly how much water in your hold, you might have thought that you were sinking, and maybe that's why they abandoned ship. However, Briggs was an experienced captain, and it seems unlikely that he'd make such a quick decision to abandon a seaworthy ship before they were certain that it was necessary. Although I guess you could argue that having your wife and 2-year-old daughter on board might impede your decision-making process a little bit. It doesn't seem like something that he'd be like, oh, we were having this minor problem, get the fuck on this lifeboat and get out of here. Given that your chances are way better on the big boat that's not actually sinking.
Maybe that should be ship policy though. Even a minor problem, get on the fucking lifeboat.
Cut the ropes, go, we're gone. Leave all your stuff.
No, that light's flashing, and we don't know what it means, but it definitely means get on that boat.
It said it's possible that fumes began leaking from the barrels of alcohol, and that the crew was moved to the lifeboat in haste for fear of being overcome by the nauseous fumes, or fear of explosion. Some rigging was found hanging over the rails, and it was suggested that maybe the lifeboat was set to sea, but originally tethered to the ship. With the ship still kind of half under sail, though, if a decent wind came along, it would be possible for it to push the bigger ship with the bigger sails far out of reach of the lifeboat. But that also kind of begs the question. It's a lot of these theories, like anything else, you start to hear them, you're like, that makes a little bit of sense if you thought the ship was going to blow up and get away from it. But if you thought the ship was sinking or it was going to blow up, why the fuck would you tether yourself to it? It might be dangerous.
I love these fumes.
I just can't. We need a little bit of the fumes, not the full thing.
Just one more huff for goodbye.
Another modern theory actually suggests that there was an actual explosion, which you'd think you'd be able to tell if that had been the case. But they actually did recent experiments that showed that the kind of explosion you get from alcohol fumes are the
It's the kind that blows your mind.
Yeah, you're just like, whoa. Pass me another one. Anyway, no, those are kind of they're very fast. It's more of a flash explosion. They don't actually leave behind any smoke or soot
or people apparently.
Right. Well, you've seen the movies. If you've gone and
just dissolve
and watch anything, you jump and the explosion's behind you and it's really fucking epic, and then you land in the sea and you're like, oh shit, now what? And then you turn around and your boat's still like sailing away and you're like, God damn it.
I thought I was fucked and now I'm fucked.
Come back, boat. But anyway, so yeah, it's possible that there was an explosion and it wouldn't have left behind like smoke and fire and that kind of stuff. But you'd think it would have at least like blown the hatches or the hull, because there's still like a bunch of pressure that results from an explosion. Or at the very least, you'd find an exploded barrel, even if only one barrel exploded. And again, then that makes for kind of a funny picture in your head where just one little barrel of alcohol explodes and does little more than make a noise, and they're like, fuck, get on the boat, go, go, go. But it also seems weird that like an experienced crew and captain were able to launch the sail-equipped lifeboat more or less within sight of land and then never be seen again.
Yeah.
So because it's a mystery at sea, you also have theories like you said, where some people say, oh, they got attacked by a kraken or some other mysterious creature, or ghosts, or aliens. Or apparently, I don't watch the show, which is will get me shamed in the internet circles, but there was an episode of Doctor Who where the abandoned ship was shown. The crew took off because the Daleks suddenly appeared on board, and I guess they were chasing the TARDIS, and so yeah, that's the show. The script writers of Doctor Who's series is that they're made up.
That's pretty much their theory on everything, right?
Everything, yeah. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle actually wrote a story about the Mary Celeste that had the ship falling victim to an ex-slave who was seeking revenge on slaving ships. But of course, that's just fiction, and there's also the problem that there's no evidence of a physical struggle or violence, and it was also not a slaving ship. While the fate of the crew will probably never be learned, the fate of the Mary Celeste is well documented. After the hearings, the ship continued to operate mainly in the West Indies and Indian Ocean routes. However, the stories of the possible violence suffered by her original crew made it an unpopular ship, because sailors are shockingly very superstitious. And so the owners ended up selling her for a considerable loss, because most of the time it was just sitting in port and nobody wanted to hire it to do anything. By 1884, she was under control of a captain named Gilman Parker. Parker, along with accomplices in the New York and Boston area, loaded the ship with largely worthless cargo and then doctored the shipping manifest to show that it was carrying valuable stuff. I don't know what, but... and they were headed for Port-au-Prince in Haiti. On his approach to port, Parker accidentally ran the ship aground, tearing the bottom of the vessel off and sinking the ship. Whoops. He and his crew then rowed to shore, where they sold the salvage rights to the American consul and filed their insurance claim, which was a bad plan because the guy that bought the salvage rights quickly discovered that the cargo was just bullshit like junk, and that didn't bode well for Parker. He and his conspirators were tried in Boston.
Not only is the ship cursed, but it turned all my precious cargo into junk.
It's weird. We landed directly on top of another wreck that was carrying junk, and pirates obviously got the good stuff out.
What dark seas are at work here, my friend? I wish you the best. I gotta go.
They did not get away with their fraud. They were tried in Boston for conspiracy to commit fraud. So it's funny because even the charge was like, you didn't actually commit fraud, you just conspired to, but it didn't go far enough to even come close to working. Parker himself was also charged with a crime known as barratry, which is the willful casting away of the ship. So basically it was a crime to purposely...
To love something, to let it go.
Right. Interestingly... The punishment for barratry at the time was death, which
holy shit.
Yeah, that seems way the fuck out of line to me. Like, okay, you tried to defraud the insurance company and your investor out of all this money, and yeah, that's not good. You sank a ship? Fuck you, you're hanging.
This is like when you go to another country and it's like, oh, I got busted for pot. What's the punishment? Life in prison.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you caught me picking up a prostitute and I had pot in my pocket. And it's like, out of the two, the first one, it's like, oh, that's completely fine here. The pot, though.
We're going to kill you.
Strapping you to the front of a cannon. Have fun.
Holy fuck. That's the first time I've ever been, like, really shocked by what you said.
Yeah. I love, like, these sea mystery and these, like, ghost ship, abandoned ship stories in general, but that was the most interesting thing I came across, because I've never heard of that crime.
Well,
and then to be like, oh, by the way, it's death.
Like, it's totally reckless, but I just imagine a kid with, like, a newspaper boat, and, like, they're selling it down the river, and, like, cops just, like, fucking bum rush him.
Get him. Anyway, the jurors in the initial trial for fraud were unable to agree to a verdict, largely because they were apparently afraid that, like, what they did in that trial might influence the upcoming trial for barratry, which obviously the punishment for that is death. So that was like, they were actually that worried. They're like, this crime is so serious, we don't want to fuck it up with a mere fraud thing if we do something wrong here. So instead of, like, finding these people guilty, the judge just said, fuck it, like, this trial's not working, and ordered them in to...
I want more judges. Just
like that. Well, yeah, he basically stepped in and was like, okay, instead of finding you guilty, I'm just ordering you to withdraw your insurance claim, so, like, to stop trying to get your fraudulent insurance money and pay back any money that you'd received from the fraud, so probably the salvage money or whatever else.
So I don't have to kill you for the most dangerous crime.
Well, that's the thing. It's like they didn't want to try him because they didn't want to influence that trial. But then that trial was deferred anyway. So good news there is that he was allowed to go free. He was not hung for sinking the ship, even though apparently he could have been.
Think about it. If we had that same standard, everybody who's ever, like, burned a car for insurance money... We'll be fucking dead now. Like,
is it? Yeah, and I mean, it's fraud. It certainly should be a crime, but it's just mind blowing that they're like, yeah, punishment's death. Like,
I don't know. I think if I hate my car enough to set it on fire, I should get the insurance money. That's not fraud. That's just it's straight up. It's a piece of shit automobile.
It's trading up. So that's the end of my story. He got it off, but the ship itself was intentionally sank off the coast of Haiti. There was a note in the Wikipedia article that Clive Cussler, if you're familiar with him, he's a fiction writer.
Cool Cussler.
He just because we're good at, like, bashing people for no reason, it's not really bashing. I've read, like, one or two of his books, and he's one of these authors that has, like, really cool, like, Indiana Jones-esque ideas, but I hate the guy's writing. Like, I just yeah. But
and also he's got a fucked up head. I don't know what he looks like, actually, but if we're bashing, we should go all in.
Him, yeah. He, at the end of the day, he's super successful, makes way the fuck more money than me, so, yeah.
Well, that's not a criteria. There's like 3 people who make less money than I do. That doesn't mean you don't suck.
True. But, anyway, my point was he thought he had found the wreck he had actually claimed to, but then when they tested the timber, it turned out it was way too recent of a wreck to be the Mary Celeste. So the ship is still out there at the bottom of the sea somewhere off of Haiti.
I call dibs.
Yeah. You find it and find out that Briggs and his original crew were in the hold all along. They weren't even dead until this dick intentionally wrecked the ship.
They were just asleep.
They got locked in the supply cabinet, like one of those sitcom things where the door keeps closing and locking from the outside, and each new person that comes to, like, figure out where people went walks into it, and the door swings shut, and everybody's like, "No, fuck!"
It's like some old timey show where it's like, "We gotta hide in this barrel," and it's like the barrel they're pushing off, like Niagara Falls.
Right. So that's my theory. I mean, it's as good as any of the other theories I read.
My theory is one big old shark who was smarter than any other thing out in that ocean.
They might have accidentally sailed through your mountain region and just disappeared.
Yeah, that's how that works.
They were talking about it. They're like, have you heard of these mountains? And then they just
we hit a jump, and that'll put us in Vermont.
Vermont's pretty easy to get to, I see.
Not the mountain region. No.
I don't know. I'm going to have to consult a map here.
Good. Let me know if that area looks at all like a fucking triangle to you, because seemed like a stretch to me.
That's the thing, is I'm sure we could go in and let's draw a triangle between the Azores, Portugal, and Boston or wherever, and be like, yep, it's
That's the thing, like they just make these arbitrary boundaries for like superstitious areas. It's like I could make all of America a triangle if I wanted to.
Yeah, I mean,
fuck, America is a triangle, basically. Like,
I mean, I imagine out by you, I know there's a ton of, in Washington area, Washington State, there's tons of wilderness. And I'm sure stories of hikers, like, getting lost or dying in the woods aren't that uncommon. It's not like
me and my friends have been trying to do it for years. Like, it's the thing to do here.
So I'm sure if we pulled up a map of even just narrowed it down to Bayou and went back 100 years and say, where's all the people that went into these woods and didn't come back, we could draw a triangle. The triangle is a very convenient shape. Plus, it sounds scarier than like the Bermuda trapezoid. You'd be like, what the fuck?
The Rhode Island rhombus.
Yeah. I do think we're vastly underserved in geometric supernatural terms.
Well, it just seems so desperate to make everything a triangle, like,
Well, you're attempting to cash in on the Bermuda Triangle's fame, which in and of itself, we've talked about that. It's an area where there's a lot of mysterious shipwrecks, but really not. It's an area with the exact normal amount of shipwrecks you would expect, given the amount of shipping routes that go through it.
Yeah. I liked the Dragon's Triangle I brought up on the show before, which was like the theory, like all the same weird shit happened, but they believed it was dragons underneath the water, like fucking ships up.
I just like that term because it sounds like a sex term. Like
the Dragon's Triangle, oh yeah. It's really advanced.
It's one of those secret Asian techniques that
you gotta warm up.
Americans, yeah.
Stretch. Oh man, I want to find out if that's a thing, but I also really don't.
Yeah, make sure you're alone when you Google it.
Yeah, or well, who knows? Maybe that's a thing you need a spotter for.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we're such a good show.
We really are, we're grooming the next generation. Anyway, we'll be back next week, episode 49. We're getting close to something. You mentioned
something big.
You mentioned it on Twitter. We don't know what's going to happen after episode 50, so...
the fabric of space-time might just rip, and there might not be a reality after.
Episode 50 recorded live from the Bennington Triangle, so...
Anyway, until then...
Yep, one more week before the special event. Yeah. So, more normalcy next week, and then less. But who are we kidding? It'll be the same shit.
Same stuff.
But, yeah. See you next week.
Goodbye.